And white gloves aren't permission. I restore paintings for a living and spend the rest of my hours trying not to restore things that don't want me to. Varnish tells the truth if you warm it gently. Lives ruin under heat. In the conservation lab, I wear white gloves because oils from the body invent their own history. At home, I try to remember that white gloves aren't permission. My name is Julian. I married Mara 10 years ago in a courthouse with a skylight that believed in mercy. She curates contemporary programs at a small museum that can't afford hubris but insists on light. My hands learn the rules of old pigments. Hers negotiate with artists who don't believe in rules at all. We meet at night where the sink knows both our names. The new artist in residence is the reason you're reading this. His name is Casper, one of those monosyllables that sound rehearsed. He makes sculptures from salvaged steel and fabric so tender it seems illegal. Reviews call him feral in a friendly way. He grew up somewhere with horses and no patience, and when he speaks, people confuse articulation for virtue. He's good, Mara said after the first studio visit. Good in our house is a neutral noun. He's also a photographer magnet. The board wants him to do a private view for donors on Friday. Private view, I repeated, the way you repeat a recipe step if it contains the word flambe. It's a joke, she said. There's press. Nothing's private. She shook her head. He's intense. The work is better than the man. I understand that sentence. In the lab, a broken thing can be extraordinary. The solvent doesn't need to like you. Still, I pay attention to adjectives that try to be verbs. On Tuesday, the museum's alarm panel decided it wanted attention and sent its agitation to every phone with the right clearance. Mine is on the list for emergencies involving climate control. Pigment and humidity are enemies who keep trying to reconcile under terrible counselors. At 22:16, Mara texted, "False alarm, I think security's on it." At 22:48, back to studio. Casper wants to move the red piece away from the window. He says the light flirts. At 23:34, our shared card pinged. A cafe nearby, 2 charges 12 minutes apart. We share the account because 2 museums live in one house. The exhibits rotate. She came in a little after midnight smelling like dust and good coffee. She put her forehead on my shoulder like a person checking weather. "False alarm," she said. "The sensors learned the word moth." 2 charges, I asked, drafting the question on the counter with the flour I hadn't cleaned from bread that tried to be an ovoid. 2 tabs, she said, polite and unafraid. Barista shift change. And Casper is allergic to paying for his own snacks unless reminded, so I reminded him and bought my own cocoa while we waited for the guard to stop apologizing to the air. She smiled. The red piece did look like it wanted a quieter window. I make lists when I want to be gentle with my certainty. On a sheet of acid-free card I use for tests, I wrote in pencil. 1. No private anything without names and doors. 2. Donor is a noun. It is not an alibi. 3. If the floor tilts, say tilt. I left the card on the kitchen shelf where the olive oil lives, because olive oil has watched people ruin more than a salad. Casper came into the lab the next afternoon because the rumor is that we can glue anything back together if you bring it flowers. He watched me clean the grime from a landscape that had learned a century of ash and children. "It's like rescue without sirens," he said. "You undo time until time behaves." He had that performance of humility some men practice, bent head, honest eyes, a smile designed for the documentary that will ask him to confess. "You're Mara's husband." "Conservator," I said, holding my brush like a polite threat. "We do triage on dead varnish." "I don't make varnish," he said. "I make trouble." He wasn't wrong. The steel twisted like arguments, the fabric draped like memory. It was good. It just also believed in being seen. On Friday afternoon, the risers arrived. Then the wine glasses with stems thinner than apologies. The museum placed 2 ficuses because donors trust trees more than walls. I finished work early and walked over to help hang a didactic panel that had opinions about the word assemblage. Mara stood in the studio doorway with her clipboard, the way a conductor holds a baton when a brass section threatens mutiny. Casper stood nearby with a wrench, and a grin turned down to the legally allowable wattage. "Don't touch the blue piece," Mara said to a guard, then to me softer. "Don't touch the blue piece. It's our joke now." She pushed a stray curl into her bun, and the bun decided to be loyal. The private view became what private views become: people with funds learning to perform, awe in rooms overstocked with intention. Casper did his part. He spoke to wealthy eyes in the dialect of myth. He called steel a river you can teach to pause. He thanked the museum 3 times, Mara twice, the light once. Cameras clicked without mercy. I watched 2 things at once: the way people navigated objects and the way Casper navigated Mara. He did not commit an obvious offense. He lived close to the red piece and let people mistake proximity for authorship. He smiled not at my wife but near her, which is a clever trick if you want to borrow a face without owning the theft. When he finally addressed her directly, it was to ask for logistical grace. Could we dim the West Bank by 5%? The fabric needs shyness. "No," she said, but in that curator tone that means the safety committee is already clapping. "We can give it a shade. We can't insult the fire code." He laughed and touched the shade chain himself, stopped by the guard's hand before he could become a new kind of lawsuit. The room politely forgot this in exchange for more wine. At 21:12, I fetched more labels from the back room because donors love to read the walls when they feel seen by nobody in particular. In the corridor, I passed Casper standing with Mara under the industrial sink's small halo of light. He was talking, she was listening with her arms folded like a border, and the distance between their shoes was respectable until he moved closer to explain the movement of something invisible. He lifted his hand, the famous tuck, the rehearsal, the hair management move that thinks itself a courtesy. Mara moved her head a centimeter left. The hand found air. "White gloves are for paintings," she said, not loud. "People own themselves." He froze, learned, laughed the kind of embarrassed laugh that has a job to do, and stepped back. "Right," he said. "Boundaries, I like boundaries. They hold the river." "And the river pays rent," she said. "We can argue about rates later." I got to be the kind of husband I want to be, one who didn't have to appear as policy. I carried the labels past them, touched Mara's elbow the way I would touch a door I had just closed properly, and kept walking because the scene had already discovered its ending. After midnight we collapsed on our sofa, the museum's applause still humming in our clothes. I showed Mara the card on the shelf. She took my pencil and added, 4. Hands belong to tools, not narratives. 5. Private view is a budget line, not a mood. We taped it to the inside of the bread box because bread forgets, rules help. If this were a detective story, the next thing would be a clue that refuses to remain a clue. Tuesday delivered something worse, an invitation dressed as gratitude. The museum director forwarded an email from Casper, humbled by Friday. Would love one-on-one time with Mara in the studio Saturday evening to film process notes for the residency archive. Small crew. Quiet. Respectful. Necessary. The director added the brave sentence administrators use when they want to be kind and not negligent. "Mara, your call." We sat in the kitchen with coffee pretending to be adult. "Necessary to whom?" I asked, "is the question." "To history," she said, because her job believes time is an employer. "I can do it. Or I can say no and ask him to schedule in daylight with a real crew and a chaperone with a clipboard." "Chaperone," I said. "Clipboard." She smiled because the world had made me into her ally by accident. We wrote a quick addendum on a receipt. Film only with a staffer present. Door stays open unless security closes it for security reasons, not feelings.